Cain later, the imperial guard-born a slave, was drawing his final breaths while shielding the deranged emperor who had forged a pact with a demon until his last moments. In those fleeting seconds, Cain pondered how history would judge him. Would he be immortalized as a knight who upheld his loyalty until death? Or would he be branded a naive fool who misread the tides of his era? Neither prospect sat well with him. "Greetings, Listine." The rebel army's leader stood before him, voice raised in weary anger, demanding why Cain had altered his sword's trajectory at the pivotal moment. Cain felt it was preferable to fade entirely from memory. Having lived 29 years as an orphan, Cain saw this fate as his own decision and implored the young master of the Duke's household, whom he greeted as "Hello," to avoid a senseless conflict. "Hello," voice breaking with torment, shouted why Cain hadn't fled, why he'd chosen this path, then cradled him as he lay dying, begging him to open his eyes and stand. After his death, Cain found himself traversing a dreamlike expanse, a vast reflective surface beneath a star-filled sky. Wondering if this was the afterlife, he realized the freedom he'd gained wasn't as glorious as he'd envisioned. As he reflected on Hello's tears and reassured himself that his friend would manage alone, a sudden surge of energy struck him. Abruptly, his soul was reborn into the body of a newborn, hearing a man's voice welcome him to the world as Karen. Still reeling from shock, an elderly man resembling an aged Hello held him, praising his bravery for not crying and wishing for his youngest grandson to grow strong. The overwhelming realization that he'd been reborn as Hollow's grandson caused the infant Karen to wail. 45 years later, 10-year-old Karen Listine, sole son of Count Bali, third son of Yahello Listine, sat in a history lesson. The instructor described the modern historical perspective on the Night Kin later, who perished alongside the wicked emperor. The teacher noted that, despite Kay's failure to steer his master from evil, he remains a symbol of steadfast loyalty for standing by his master until the end. When asked for his thoughts, Karen first inquired about the teacher's view. The teacher shared the common belief that Grand Duke Yahello sought to restore his friend's honor, referencing their famed friendship. Karen, however, stunned his teacher with a divergent perspective, asserting that his grandfather, Yahello, despised his late friend and deliberately burnished Cain's legacy for that reason. The teacher, taken aback, asked for clarification. Karen elaborated, theorizing that his grandfather couldn't forgive Cain for choosing death over joining the revolution, thus defying Cain's wish to vanish quietly without heroic acclaim. The teacher, astonished, recalled unofficial accounts suggesting the duel between Yahello and Cain ended too swiftly for their equal skill. He realized that if Cain had intentionally chosen death over fighting his friend, Karen's argument held weight, marveling at a 10-year-old's profound insight. Flustered, the teacher thought that agreeing with this bold opinion might provoke the Duke's knights to accuse him of disloyalty. Stammering, he admitted he'd never considered this angle. Karen suddenly burst into laughter, revealing he was only jesting and wondering why his teacher was so shocked. Later, Karen reflected on his current life, confirming to himself that he was now Karen Listine, the youngest grandson of the Duke Listine's family. It took time to accept, but he eventually understood he'd been reborn as Yahello Listine's grandson. Angrily, he wondered how that fool dared to make him a celebrated hero against his clear wishes. He should have known better. Later, Karen found his father, Bali, Yahello's youngest son, in prayer. After his lesson, Karen approached and asked if his father was anxious about the upcoming awakening ceremony. Bali apologized, and when Karen pressed why, his father voiced concern that he might have passed on his own limitations, having failed to awaken his magical power, unlike his brothers. Karen warmly reassured him, declaring that, no matter what others said, he was the greatest father. Moved to tears, Bali embraced his son, calling him the best son in return, then fondly asked what he wanted for dinner. Karen eagerly replied, "Meat, obviously." In his room, as Karen contemplated the awakening ceremony, memories of his past life as Cain resurfaced. He recalled a conversation with a young Yahello, who described the awakening ceremony as an ancient family ritual to unlock latent magical power. Cain had scoffed, dismissing inherited powers as gifts for those born with privilege. Yahello explained that not all could awaken their power, and even those who did weren't guaranteed to lead the family. Yahello then tried to spark Cain's curiosity by mentioning a remarkable secret passed only to the family head. When Kane asked if it was a vast treasure or a wish-granting spellbook, Yahello nodded. Kane admitted mild interest but shared his true dream of living quietly in seclusion. When Yahello chuckled at this, Kane feigned offense at his friend's teasing. In earnest, Yahello vowed that when he became family head, he'd make an exception and share this secret with him. Back in the present, Karen sat in his room, thinking about the awakening ceremony. He resolved that his father had no cause for worry. Blue energy and sparks began to envelop his body, revealing he'd already awakened his magical power long ago. In a later moment, Karen stood with his parents, gazing in awe at a sleek, advanced train, marveling, as it was his first time seeing one. His mother proudly noted that many technologies in the train's creation were commercialized due to Bali's personal support. Bali downplayed his role, but his mother insisted it was remarkable. Karen agreed wholeheartedly, proclaiming his pride in his father. On the train, Karen admired his father, who, despite lacking magical power, was an extraordinary man managing 30% of the Listane Duchy's finances single-handedly. With a devoted mother and a father dedicated to his family, Karen deemed them truly ideal parents. As the train journeyed on, Karen spotted a grand castle in the distance through the window. Chong Castle, the Liston family's main residence. A mix of excitement and anger stirred within him as he thought of his grandfather, Hollow Liston, residing there. His resentment flared, questioning how Hollow dared to immortalize him as a historical figure against his will. At that moment, Karen released a faint pulse of magical energy, rousing his father. In that instant, he resolved to become a relentless thorn in his grandfather's side and the most notorious troublemaker in Liston family history. In his mind, Karen challenged his grandfather to brace for what his dear youngest grandson, now approaching, would unleash. When the train reached the station, a welcoming party greeted them. Karen's father exchanged pleasantries with a man named Hinrich, who expressed ongoing gratitude for the Duke's family's generosity. The Sea Wolf, Karen's gaze was drawn to the knights stationed at the outpost, noting their distinct appearance compared to those from his homeland. He pondered whether they had sensed the mana he had already awakened, though he was unconcerned about the possibility of word reaching his grandfather. It was only a matter of time, he thought, as the family was ushered into the grand castle, led to a spacious reception hall where Karen was told to wait while Count Bali went to meet the family elders. Growing restless in the expansive room, Karen wished he had requested to visit the library instead. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by another boy in the room who taunted him, saying the rumors were true. Karen was indeed a bookworm, since his first request upon arriving was for the library. The boy went further, insulting Karen and his father, claiming that as a descendant of his uncle Bali's line, Karen's chances of awakening mana were slim, suggesting he studied to earn a living like common folk, just like his father. Infuriated, Karen calmly challenged the boy, asking if he wanted to fight. Surprised by Karen's response, the boy summoned a faint trace of mana, thinking he'd let Karen have the advantage. But Karen, wondering if a troublemaker was being raised in the main household, unleashed his own powerful mana aura, leaving the boy utterly shocked. Stammering, the boy asked when and how Karen had awakened his mana, to which Karen replied with a grin that even his father was unaware of it. Addressing his cousin as brother, Karen declared there was no room for two troublemakers in the family, and that he would claim that role, leaving his cousin paralyzed with fear. Karen then radiated a fearsome aura and proposed to his cousin Leo that they have a small sparring match. Elsewhere in the castle, the eldest uncle, Tiles Lon, sat with his two brothers. Heinrich informed them that Karen had already awakened his mana, a fact confirmed by the third knight commander. The second uncle, Raphael Lon, remarked that Karen had concealed his mana awakening from the main house, questioning the motives of their brother, Bali, whom he labeled a failure. Bali appeared genuinely shocked, insisting he had no knowledge of it either. Tiles reprimanded Raphael for his quick judgment, noting it wasn't surprising that the failure was unaware, given his own inability to awaken mana, and called the situation pitiful. Suddenly, a servant rushed into the room in a panic, urging the head butler to come quickly and muttering about a misunderstanding involving the young master, Raphael's son. Realizing it concerned his son, Raphael stood up in a fury. Meanwhile, in the reception hall, Leo lay defeated on the floor. When Raphael arrived and saw the scene, he seized Karen in anger, calling him an ill-mannered whelp and demanding to know what he was thinking. At that moment, Bali and Tiles entered. Karen coolly explained that Leo had insulted his father. He asked his uncle if he would have stayed silent in his place. Raphael dismissed Karen's words as nonsense, grabbed him, and told Bali to be quiet, blaming him for failing to raise his son properly. The head butler intervened, calling for calm and announcing that the master of the house, Lord Ho, would judge the matter himself. Raphael was ordered to release Karen, which he did reluctantly. Bali hurried to his son to ensure he was unharmed, and Karen reassured him he was fine. The head butler then instructed everyone to proceed to see the master of the house. As they walked down the long corridor, Karen reflected that it had been some time since he last saw Lord Ho 03. Upon entering the study, Ho, seated behind his desk, confronted them directly, asking Karen why he had caused such a commotion so soon after arriving. Bali attempted to defend his son, but Ho silenced him sharply, stating he hadn't asked him and wanted to hear directly from Karen. Ho acknowledged that Karen wasn't reckless enough to act without considering the consequences and demanded a detailed account of his actions. Internally, Karen was surprised by Ho's willingness to hear him out before deciding punishment, viewing it as an unexpected act of fairness. Karen reiterated that Leo had insulted his father. Raphael erupted again, accusing Karen of lying and demanding the truth. Ho slammed his fist on the desk, ordering Raphael to be silent and questioning how he dared raise his voice in his presence. Raphael apologized to his father Ho, who decided to summon Leo to verify the facts, and instructed Heinrich to bring him once his treatment was complete. But first, Ho turned to Karen, noting that the insult wasn't the only matter he wished to discuss. Anticipating the question, Karen cheerfully revealed that he had awakened his mana 3 years ago, stunning those present. Ho asked why he had kept it hidden, even from his father, marveling inwardly at a boy who awakened mana independently at such a young age. Karen explained that he hadn't realized it was mana until he read about it in a book later. When Ho pressed him further, Karen smiled innocently and said he simply wanted to keep it a secret, adding that secrets were fun, especially since the knights in his region were clueless. Ho asked if that was all, and Karen confirmed it with a cheerful nod. At that moment, Leo arrived, bandaged from his injuries, and Ho immediately asked if he had indeed insulted his uncle. Karen launched into a dramatic performance, speaking with feigned sorrow about Leo's insult, portraying his father as a crude man obsessed with money, incompetent and arrogant, and wondering how much pain his father would feel if he died without redemption. Karen then admitted that, despite this, he shouldn't have struck Leo and acknowledged his grave mistake. Horrified by this exaggerated retelling, Leo vehemently denied saying it. Karen released a burst of mana to intimidate his cousin. Ho calmly asked Leo if Karen's account was accurate, and Leo, trembling, admitted it was true. After hearing the confession, Ho decided that since the awakening ceremony was the following day, he would delay both boys' punishment until afterward, and ordered them to rest. Later that night, Ho asked his servant Heinrich for his thoughts on Bali's son. Heinrich diplomatically replied that the boy had many qualities that might intrigue the master of the house. Ho agreed, describing Karen as a fascinating boy, not only for awakening mana on his own and hiding it for 3 years, but also for subtly critiquing the knights in his father's territory, which Ho interpreted as a hint that he had been neglecting his son, Bali. Though Heinrich thought his master might be overanalyzing, Ho insisted this grandson was unique. He said they would learn Karen's true character and whether he possessed something extraordinary at the next day's ceremony, expressing keen curiosity about whether Karen would complete it safely and what he might gain. That night, the family gathered outdoors for the ceremony. Karen noticed the Liston family elders in their robes, sensing their formidable power despite their retirement. He also saw all family members present, Tiles with his daughter, Leon, and Raphael with his son, Leo. Karen realized the ceremony's significance exceeded his expectations. At the center was a stone platform bearing a large black stone, which Karen instantly recognized as the Oath Stone. Ho announced the start of the eye-opening ritual, explaining that when Karen passed through the rift opened by the Oath Stone, he would enter a unique world shown to him by the stone. This world varied for each person, and the ritual would conclude when Karen shattered that world, using the weapon of clear insight he would obtain there. After Karen confirmed his readiness, Ho activated the Oathstone with a necklace, causing a pillar of blue energy to erupt, opening a glowing rift in the air. Bali, gripping his son's shoulder anxiously, asked if he was afraid and if he would be all right. Karen reassured his father that he would be fine and promised to return. He thought about the task of shattering the world with a weapon he would acquire, considering it simple, as breaking things was his forte. From afar, Ho silently wished for his grandson to conquer his fear. As Karen stepped through the rift, he found himself in a hauntingly familiar place, the Imperial Palace, ablaze and littered with the bodies of his fallen comrades. Furious, he wondered why the stone was showing him these painful memories, and whether it intended to make him feel guilt for his comrades' unjust deaths. Karen heard an enigmatic voice describing his world as bleak and sorrowful, naming him the offspring of the Blue Wolf. The voice declared that the moment of the covenant had arrived and that he was destined to fulfill the oath sworn by his forebear. Karen questioned the unseen voice, asking if it was a demon, but it refuted the notion, insisting that no wretched demon would dare taint the blood flowing through his veins. The voice encouraged Karen to cast aside his fear and ascend to the throne, where his heart's desire awaited. As Karen approached the throne, which the Emperor had fiercely sought to safeguard, even striking a pact with a demon, he climbed the steps leading to it, feeling as though he trod upon the bodies of the fallen, haunted by the realization that he had never foreseen their deaths would stem from this. There, he discovered his old weapon. The voice greeted him as a member of the Blue Wolf clan and declared the weapon his own. Karen instantly recognized his cherished sword, bestowed upon him by the Emperor, the demonic blade known as Ruin. The voice instructed him to infuse it with mana, but Karen protested, warning, "This sword consumes its wielder's soul." The voice reassured him that the malevolent spirit once dwelling within the blade had been eradicated by his grandfather, and what remained was merely a warped remnant of the demon's curse. It added that only Karen could awaken its true power. Hesitant, Karen questioned the safety of touching the sword, fearing a return to his former self, the one who followed the Emperor's commands and claimed countless lives. At that moment, Ho's voice resonated in his mind, urging him to conquer his fear. Karen finally grasped the true purpose behind Ho's unusual compassion. The eye-opening ritual was not merely about claiming a weapon, but about the heir, awakened by the mana of clear insight, overcoming their deepest fear. With this revelation, Karen reached for the sword with newfound resolve. The moment he grasped it, a surge of blue energy mana of clear insight coursed through him, and the sword's form began to transform in his hand. The mysterious voice admitted it was unsure why the sword had appeared to him in its former guise, Ruin, but explained that it originally belonged to his ancestor, Rael. The voice noted that, unlike the sword Gram, which Hollow had taken, this blade's history was unrecorded because its power was fundamentally different from the family's. As the sword's latent mana began to bind itself to Karen's body, he felt excruciating pain. The voice commanded him to endure it. Karen sensed the mana within him growing fiercer, and he asked the voice for the sword's true name. The voice revealed it was the execution sword Guillotine, a blade that had severed countless demons and absorbed their powers, so feared that demons erased its memory from existence. Karen reflected on his weapon's new title. The voice remarked that a sword evoking the abyss of the deep sea was perfectly suited to Karen's fate. Karen inquired about the voice's identity, speculating it might be the Blue Dragon, guardian of their house. The voice responded that Karen lacked the strength to bear its true name, and invited him to seek it in the North Sea, when he gained the power to command the seas. When Karen asked how to depart this realm, the voice hinted that he already knew the answer. Karen realized he must shatter the world, as instructed at the ritual's outset. With fervor, he proclaimed he had always wanted to try it, then swung the sword with force, fracturing the illusory realm around him. In the real world, Ho was comforting a worried Bali, admitting it was painful for a father to watch his son tread a path he could not. Yet he emphasized that such moments demanded proof of resolve. Suddenly, the oath stone began to crack violently, and Leo shouted, warning his grandfather that the stone was breaking apart. In a moment of collective shock, the stone shattered completely. Karen emerged in a burst of light where the broken stone had stood, clutching his new sword. Smiling, he glanced around and asked what had happened to the oath stone, noting its destruction. Bali confronted him with anger, demanding to know what he had done. Karen, with cheerful confidence, raised the sword aloft and declared it the execution sword guillotine, wielded by their ancestor, Rael-Listine. These words stunned Ho and the elders. This legendary blade had been erased from the family's written history, its existence preserved only in oral tradition among the patriarch and elders. They wondered why it had resurfaced now, while Ho pondered if the time of the covenant was nearing. Ho asked his grandson if he feared the sword, to which Karen replied with unwavering certainty, "No." As Ho processed the situation, he reflected on ancient history. Long ago, their ancestors forged a covenant with the blue dragons to vanquish demons, leaving the oath stone as a symbol, awaiting the descendant destined to fulfill the vow. Ho gazed at Karen, wondering if he was that chosen one. Accordingly, Ho raised his hand and formally proclaimed Karen, son of Bali-Listane, chosen by the execution sword guillotine, as a legitimate member of Cheong Castle and a direct heir entitled to initiation rights. This declaration infuriated Raphael, who protested granting such rights to a mere boy. Meanwhile, Bali rushed to check on his son, but Karen assured him he was unharmed. Tiles, the eldest uncle, was lost in thought, admitting inwardly that he had never heard of this fabled sword, and that its aura, alone, was chilling. In his mind, Tiles addressed Bali, warning that he would not allow the matter of succession to be swayed by a new factor like Karen, even though his nephew now walked an unprecedented path. Ho then declared the eye-opening ceremony concluded and ordered everyone to depart. As they left, Raphael angrily confronted his older brother Tiles, asking if he would simply stand by. Tiles calmly replied that they would soon sit and discuss. Raphael, frustrated, wondered why Bali's son, of all people, was chosen. Tiles advised that their priority was to avoid internal conflict. As Bali prepared to leave with Karen's mother, he asked his son with concern if he would be all right alone. Hinrik reassured him that Cheong Castle was the safest place. Bali acknowledged its safety from external threats, but voiced concern about internal ones, though he noted his brothers would not dare act recklessly in their father's presence. Hinrik informed them that Lady Sabina would oversee Karen's initiation rites, relieving both Karen and Bali. Sabina Listane, Ho's younger sister, was renowned for skills rivaling her brothers and bore the nickname White Wolf. Bali advised Karen to show her respect, and Karen promised he would. Before departing, Hinrik relayed a final message from Ho. A permanent residence would be prepared for Bali's family at the castle, and they could visit any time. Bali, deeply touched by his father's gesture, thanked Hinrik, saying he could now leave with peace of mind. He bid farewell to Karen, urging him to stay safe and turn to him if needed. After the train departed, Hinrik led Karen through the castle, noting that Lady Sabina awaited him. Before reaching their destination, Hinrik advised Karen to avoid calling Sabina grandmother, as she despised the title. Karen thanked him for the tip, though he privately found it peculiar. They arrived at the Spirit Training Hall in Changhae Forest, a sacred place reserved for the direct bloodline. Hinrik informed Karen that Sabina was waiting inside, along with Leo, at Raphael's special request. Karen, delighted, entered, while Hinrik mused to himself that things were about to get lively again. Karen felt an immense mana aura radiating from the hall before stepping inside. Upon entering, he announced his arrival, greeting the White Wolf. A sharp voice from within commanded him to enter immediately. Karen was taken aback by Sabina's youthful appearance. She welcomed him, asking if he was surprised that she didn't match his expectations. Sabina remarked on how swiftly time had passed, noting that Bali's dear son had grown. Karen realized her ageless appearance stemmed from reconstructing her body with mana, a feat only achievable by an 8-star master. Sabina instructed Karen to sit cross-legged beside Leo. Karen obeyed, and whispered to his anxious cousin that they would see much of each other from now on, expressing his excitement for it. Sabina remarked on his awareness of her title. Karen explained that he had learned about it from history books, as he enjoyed reading them. Sabina grinned and noted that, just as her brother Yahello had described, Karen was indeed a fascinating young man. When Karen inquired about what his grandfather had said, she shared his words, "He's a boy you'll find quite likable," adding that she now saw why after meeting him herself. Sabina recalled her discussion with Yahello, who had portrayed Karen as a child destined to navigate a vast ocean, and asked her to serve as his guiding lighthouse so he could one day master that sea. In Karen, Sabina saw immense potential, like an untamed, boundless sea. Though still rough around the edges, she believed he might one day lead an entire generation. Meeting such an intriguing boy, she found the encounter delightfully entertaining. Sabina began the lesson, explaining that sitting cross-legged was the cornerstone of mana cultivation. She noted that once they moved beyond the initial stage, they could cultivate mana without sitting, as she herself did. She then unleashed a surge of clear sea mana, leaving the boys in awe. Sabina described the Sea Overlord method, which involved creating an ocean of mana within the body and mastering its control. She elaborated that a person's strength grew with the number of oceans they could command. Controlling 8 oceans signified reaching the rank of 8 stars, while unifying those 8 into one vast sea marked the realm of 9 stars. She revealed that only 3 people on the continent had achieved this level, and just 1 within the empire. Karen instantly realized this person was his grandfather, Yahello. Sabina confirmed that the sole 9-star expert on the continent was her brother, Hololistine. This revelation sparked a fire of resolve in Karen, who vowed that in this lifetime he would surpass his grandfather. Sabina noticed this fierce ambition for power in the boy and found him genuinely amusing. Convinced he was worthy of training, she initiated the mana exercises, instructing the boys to channel mana into the pathways opened during the awakening ceremony, emphasizing that mana's power should be embraced, not forced. Observing their mana waves, Sabina saw that Karen's were still somewhat unrefined, and she guided him to begin from the heart. She was immediately struck by Karen's ability, wondering how someone so recently awakened could wield such power. She compared him to Leo, who was only just approaching the 2-star level despite having learned the Sea Overlord method 2 years earlier. In contrast, Karen, without any prior guidance, was instinctively forging his own mana pathways. Karen felt intense strain, as if his body were being torn apart, and chose to pause his cultivation. Sabina initially thought he was fatigued, but she soon realized he had skillfully adjusted his pace. At that moment, Leo collapsed from overexerting his mana, prompting Sabina to rush to his side and reprimand him for pushing too hard. She admitted to herself that she had been distracted by observing Karen. She reflected that adults must protect children from harming themselves through recklessness. Karen glanced at Leo with disdain, calling his performance embarrassing. 0-4, Sabina compared the two, noting that Karen had accurately gauged his limits and stopped before injury, impressing her with his self-discipline despite his hunger for power. She began to question whether this boy truly needed a lighthouse to guide him. Addressing Karen, Sabina promised to ensure his safety for 3 years, urging him to focus on building his strength during that time so he could protect himself later. Karen agreed with enthusiasm. Later, at the dueling training ground, Leo approached Karen and asked if he intended to use the guillotine sword even during practice. Karen responded, asking if there was an issue with that, explaining that his grandfather had provided a special scabbard to contain the sword's aura. A new instructor approached and introduced himself as Xerus Winterguard, commander of the Seawolf Knights, who would train the boys in swordsmanship. Karen greeted Sir Xerus courteously, noting to himself that he was an 8-star expert. Xerus informed the boys he would not call them young master until they earned the Seawolf Knights' respect. Karen replied that he was fine with that and found it more comfortable, adding that he knew earning the Blue Wolves' respect through skill was a Liston family tradition. Xerus was taken aback by Karen's unexpected response, as most nobles would have taken offense. Initially, Xerus thought the family might finally have a serious, steadfast heir, but Karen's confident inner thought that everyone would eventually bow to him prompted Xerus to reconsider. He concluded that Karen was not a serious heir but a scoundrel worse than Leo. Meanwhile, Sabina was cautioning her brother Yahello, urging him to consider Karen's impact on the succession structure and what it meant for Hello's own son, Ho. Ho wondered if she was suggesting that his son might be overshadowed by his nephew. Sabina clarified that if Karen's extraordinary talent became widely known across the empire, it would inevitably influence the succession. She expressed concern to Yahello that their family might face turmoil now that the Oath Stone had been shattered, especially with the rising number of demons emerging from beyond the North Sea. Yahello dismissed her worries as absurd, and shared a secret prophecy known only to the family head. The one who breaks the stone will establish a new one, as their ancestor once did. Sabina realized this signaled the nearing of the Covenant's time. When she asked when he would tell Karen, Yahello replied that it would happen when the moment was right. In the winter, Bali was reading a letter from his son, Karen, who wrote to assure him of his well-being and shared his training progress, having recently mastered the fourth form of 2 distinct swordsmanship styles. He mentioned his efforts to bond with his relatives, as Bali had requested, and that he was taking special care of Leo. At the letter's end, he playfully asked for more money, as his allowance had run out, making Bali chuckle fondly. In a conversation with Heinrich, Bali recalled his anxiety when he first left Karen at the castle 3 years ago. Heinrich reassured him that Karen had adapted remarkably well, bringing life to the once quiet castle. Though Bali had advised his son to avoid drawing attention, Heinrich wisely noted that a jewel shines even when still. However, he warned that Karen's growing reputation might soon be impossible to contain, and as a blue wolf, he would need to undertake assigned tasks. Bali's greatest concern was his brother's reaction to Karen's rising influence. Heinrich offered final advice, noting that Lady Sabina was very fond of Karen. Bali felt reassured by this. He remarked that the monthly allowance he sent seemed worthwhile, and Heinrich expressed joy at seeing Bali joke and appear less worried. But Bali voiced concern about his aunt's imminent departure from the castle. Heinrich reassured him, explaining that Karen had formed a strong bond with the Seawolf Knights, who had nicknamed him the Little Rabid Blue Sea Dog. At the training ground, Karen was training fiercely, effortlessly overpowering a large knight named Hans. Karen criticized Hans's weakness, stating that the Seawolf sword technique was useless if overcome by brute force, and that one must fight with strength, even if their bones break. Hans conceded, admitting Karen's superior strength projection, while Karen mocked his muscles, calling them balloon muscles. Hans admitted the term was new to him, and acknowledged that, without mana, he could no longer match Karen, marveling at the young man's strength gained in just 1 year. Hans then informed Karen that he would likely be sent on a mission soon, with Sir Xerus deciding the timing, as Yahello was in the capital. He speculated their destination would be the Celestial Dome region in the Duchy's west, where demon sightings were increasing. Nearby, Leo trained nervously, dreading the idea of going on the same mission as Karen, but hoping to make his parents proud if he performed well. Back in the present, Bali confided to Heinrich that his summons wasn't solely due to Karen's letter. He handed Heinrich a small pouch explaining that their territory's gate inspectors had found it in a merchant's cart from the barony of Balos. Bali verified that the substance was a drug known as cocaine and instructed him to probe into the issue of the barony of Balos, beginning at Blue Sea Castle. At the train station, a passenger stepped off, questioning if this was indeed Blue Sea Castle. That evening, Karen roamed the castle grounds after sneaking in and pilfering a bottle of liquor from Xerus's private stash, muttering to himself that tampering with Xerus's collection was always thrilling. While savoring his drink, he overheard a visitor urgently requesting to see Duke Listing. The guard confirmed that the Duke was in the capital, and that Knight Commander Xerus was overseeing matters. Karen interjected, and when the guard recognized him, the visitor introduced himself as the youthful Baron Rohan Belowos. Rohan had heard tales of Karen, and recognized him from those rumors. Though Rohan's aide proposed consulting the Knight Commander, Karen insisted on hearing the visitor's tale himself, stating that it was only courteous for a noble to personally attend to a guest arriving with urgent business. Karen directed the guard to send a separate note to Xerus. Rohan was struck by Karen's political acumen, though he was uneasy seeing a young boy clutching a liquor bottle. Karen then invited Rohan to follow him. In a secluded chamber, Karen outlined Rohan's predicament, a band of outlaws in the eastern mountains of his barony. Rohan confirmed this, noting that these criminals were distributing drugs and abducting people to sell as slaves. With regret, Rohan explained that his barony was impoverished and militarily feeble, and his father's attempt to confront the bandits had ended in failure, leaving him injured and confined to bed. Karen slammed the liquor bottle on the table in fury, declaring that merely shredding these villains was insufficient punishment. Yet, he raised a perplexing point, questioning how a simple band of outlaws could overpower a regular army. Rohan suggested they might be deserters from the Southern Kingdom's forces, currently embroiled in conflict. Karen analyzed the situation, deducing that after the evil emperor's abdication, the imperial army had redirected its diminished resources to the southern war, creating a security gap in the north that allowed deserters to turn to banditry. Rohan concurred that this explanation seemed the most likely. Karen then offered Rohan a drink, noting that the barony of Balos bordered the fiefdom where his father resided, making this a personal matter for him too, and he expressed his intent to assist directly. Rohan appreciated the gesture but privately questioned the propriety of accepting a drink from a boy. Karen gleefully admitted the liquor was stolen from Sir Xerxes' collection and asked Rohan to keep it confidential. Rohan was stunned to hear the name of the renowned knight commander. At that moment, Xerxes entered and asked Karen if they hadn't agreed he wouldn't touch his liquor. Flustered, Rohan spilled his drink, but Xerxes calmed him. Addressing Rohan, Xerxes confirmed he was aware of his dire situation with the bandits, which Rohan affirmed as his reason for seeking aid. As Xerxes began to respond, Karen cut in. Xerxes turned to him, reprimanding him for drinking at his age and confiscating the bottle. Xerxes apologized to the young baron for the scene, then assured him that Blue Sea Castle would not stand idle while a long-standing ally suffered, revealing plans to organize and deploy troops soon. Karen volunteered for the mission, but Xerxes promptly refused, citing the enemy's training and potential for skilled fighters. Rohan was taken aback by Karen's earnest desire to help. Xerxes objected, noting that real combat differed from training. Karen argued that overprotection was harmful, but Xerxes countered that he'd rather send him to face a known threat in the west than an uncertain one. Karen smirked and asked what if he made an offer Xerxes couldn't refuse. Later, at the train station, Leo was dismayed at being compelled to join the mission, while Karen, thrilled about their first assignment, threw an arm around him. Watching the scene, Xerxes realized Karen had outmaneuvered him, using Lady Sabina as leverage. Xerxes thought this might be for the best, as a dependable guardian would accompany them, and his agreement to Leo's inclusion implied satisfaction with their training results. Baron Rohan, also present to see them off, was deeply concerned about the safety of the Duke's grandsons and his family's liability if harm befell them. Xerxes reassured him, explaining that with Sabina present, the boys would be safe. However, Sabina interjected with a startling declaration: she would not intervene unless the boys faced mortal danger. This horrified Rohan and Leo. Xerxes remarked on her typical boldness, and Sabina hinted at a reason preventing her from fighting on the front lines, which Xerxes seemed to understand and accept. At the station, Sabina noticed Leo trembling and told him she understood his fear, but urged him to view the mission as a chance to prove his dedication to his 3 years of training and earn recognition as a blue wolf. Karen, with his usual sarcasm, wondered if Leo always needed a push. Leo snapped back, but Karen's words sparked his resolve, and he realized it was time to prove himself. The magic train left Blue Sea Castle for the barony of Balos. As it departed, Karen reflected that he hadn't expected this moment to arrive so soon. On the train, Sabina explained to Rohan why she couldn't fight openly. Her presence at Blue Sea Castle was a secret, and if discovered, the bandits would vanish. Rohan remained worried about sending 2 boys on such a mission, noting Karen's calm demeanor contrasted with Leo's obvious anxiety. Meanwhile, Leo recalled his mother's scolding, questioning how he could associate with Karen after a humiliation 3 years prior that tarnished his father's honor. She insisted Karen was his rival, not his friend. When Leo stayed silent, she called him weak. Finally, Leo responded, clarifying that Karen wasn't his rival but his goal, as Karen had reached the 4-star martial arts level at 13, while Leo, at 15, was only at 3 stars. His mother concluded by saying he focused only on the competition, missing the broader picture. Back on the train, Sabina spoke to Leo, who admitted his nerves about his first mission. She asked directly if he could kill a man. Leo hesitated, but Sabina encouraged him, saying she knew better than anyone how hard he'd trained, as she was his mentor. Touched, Leo called her master. With the train's arrival announced in 20 minutes, Sabina declared they'd address each other as master and student during the mission. She then announced she'd jump from the train to scout ahead unnoticed. Rohan protested the danger, but Sabina assured him he wouldn't be held accountable, as her nephews would watch from afar. Karen admired her boldness, and Sabina leaped from the train, leaving Rohan and Leo stunned by the Liston family's eccentricities. Upon arriving at the barony of Balos, they were greeted by Rohan's father, the injured Baron Balos, who apologized for receiving them seated due to his frail health. Karen politely told him not to worry, and inquired about his injuries. Meeting the bedridden Baron, he thanked the boys for their concern, recalling meeting Karen and his father a decade ago and noting how well Karen had grown, surely making his father proud. Uncomfortable with formalities, Karen asked the Baron to speak plainly, and the Baron agreed to call him young Master Karen. The Baron, showing sharp insight, deduced that Karen's first mission meant he'd reached the 4-star martial arts level at a young age. He expressed confidence in the main house's judgment of the boy's abilities, but voiced concern about sending 2 promising youths on such a perilous task. Karen reassured him, acknowledging his worry but stating that failure would disgrace the Blue Wolves, and they never contemplated failure. Turning to Leo for confirmation, Leo reluctantly agreed they'd succeed. The Baron laughed and thanked them for their confidence. Karen observed that the Baron required rest and declared their departure. The Baron entrusted the task to them, providing a guide to lead the way. The young boy embarked with the guide through the snow-laden mountains. Karen teased Leo, asking if he was already weary, but Leo brushed it off, voicing his suspicion of the guide, noting there was no assurance he wasn't conspiring with the bandits. Karen, with a mocking tone, praised Leo for finally using his brain, then coolly confirmed that Leo's doubts were valid. The guide was likely a bandit himself. Shocked, Leo demanded how Karen knew. Karen revealed he had overheard Baron Rohan's conversation at the station. In a flashback, Rohan's aide inquired how they'd find the bandits' hideout, and Rohan responded that they'd employ a traitor within the region. When Leo questioned why Karen hadn't shared this earlier, Karen replied that Leo had been on edge all day. Karen then assessed the situation, highlighting Rohan's cleverness in using the traitor against them, explaining to Leo that their role was to serve as bait, as their capture as young nobles would demand a hefty ransom. Karen noted that the traitor's survival and lack of punishment so far confirmed this, signaling their desperate circumstances. The guide, Sven, led them into an ambush orchestrated by the bandit leader, who rewarded Sven extra for bringing young nobles. One bandit remarked that the 2 youths didn't seem like they'd comply easily. Karen and Leo prepared to fight, with Karen fiercely proclaiming he wouldn't forgive them for spreading drugs across his father's territory. Back at the Baron's residence, Rohan asked his father if he was feeling all right. His father assured him of his well-being. Rohan offered a glass of water, then, with concern, asked if the 2 young men would be safe. The Baron replied that Blue Sea Castle's decision to send the boys without full details showed confidence in their skills. He added that Karen resembled Duke Ho in his youth not just in looks, but in his bold confidence and composed, dignified manner. At the residence, Baron Balos expressed to his son his trust in placing expectations on the 2 youths. Meanwhile, in the snowy mountains, Karen fought fiercely, supernaturally decapitating bandits with skill. Leo watched in horrified silence, thinking to himself that Karen was truly monstrous. The bandit deputy leader, nervous, urged the leader to retreat and alert the main force, warning that these were no ordinary foes. Infuriated, the bandit leader refused to be bested by a green boy and charged at Karen with a red aura. Karen, unfazed, called his war cry irritating and cleaved him in half with one strike. Leo stood stunned as Karen casually remarked that he'd unintentionally used a potent technique, grumbling that the leader's blood had dirtied his clothes. A surviving bandit, Orha, was overwhelmed by Karen's sword aura and surrendered instantly. With a sly grin, Karen asked Orha if he had rope and instructed him to fetch it. To Leo's astonishment, Karen had Orha bind both him and Leo and arm himself with their swords. When Leo questioned the elaborate ruse, Karen explained that to be convincing bait and uncover the bandits' base, their capture needed to appear credible, as 2 nobles captured by 1 unarmed man would seem implausible. As they trekked, Karen interrogated Orha, who, terrified, admitted they were deserters from Kais's southern war zone. When asked about their numbers, Orha revealed there were 130 at the fortress, including 2 mages and their guard knights. Orha realized too late the gravity of his error, recognizing his captives as heirs of the powerful Liston family. Karen found Orha's tale of their leader promising easy money illogical, questioning why elite mages would align with a mere infantry captain and target the impoverished barony of Balos for robberies. Concluding the story didn't add up, Karen decided they needed to see the truth for themselves. Upon arriving at the bandit hideout, guards were surprised to see Orha with hostages. At the entrance, they questioned why he returned alone and armed. Orha claimed he'd taken the weapons as loot from the young masters, and that his comrades were pursuing escapees. The guards mocked him but opened the gate. Inside, Karen noted to himself that these deserters seemed careless. Yet, he sensed an unsettling power, and his sword, guillotine, reacted to it. He soon pinpointed the source: bird carcasses hung as sacrifices, and a large black magic circle on the ground. Karen swiftly ordered Orha to untie him and return his sword, then told a stunned Leo to draw his sword, Sulfid, warning he'd need it soon. As the magic circle activated, armed skeletons rose, panicking Orha. The bandit leader appeared, mockingly welcoming the hostages to his mountain stronghold. Karen scanned for the black mage, but couldn't spot him, deducing he was hidden. Dero, 4. Swiftly, he seized Orha as a hostage, pressing a sword to his neck and threatening to kill him if the bandits attacked. Leo, shocked, saw this as a violation of noble honor. The bandit leader taunted Karen, asking if nobles didn't prioritize honor. Karen retorted, questioning why he shouldn't use such tactics. The leader found Karen intriguing but declared Orha worthless, giving Karen free rein to deal with him. He shoved Orha toward Karen. As Leo realized they were trapped, he asked Karen for the plan. Karen confidently replied that it was simple: eliminate the leader. Noticing Karen's blue mana aura, the leader looked concerned. Karen told Leo he'd handle the leader while Leo dealt with the skeleton. Before Leo could fully grasp this, Karen charged at the leader, leaving Leo to face the risen skeletal army alone. Panic gripped Leo as the skeletons closed in, wondering how he could handle them solo. Meanwhile, Karen reached the leader, unleashing a powerful strike, shouting, "Third form of the Seawolf Sword!" His attack severed the leader's hand, causing him to collapse in pain and curse Karen as a damned brat. Karen mocked him, saying he should have attacked sooner. The leader questioned why Blue Sea Castle was meddling in their affairs. Karen explained that this barony bordered his father's lands and stated he didn't intend to kill him, but would take him to the castle. Meanwhile, Leo fought the skeletons with surprising skill. 0-4. From afar, Karen watched, urging him to fight with raw strength, as taught by the Seawolf's sword art. Returning to the wounded leader, Michael Knox, Karen confirmed his name, then coldly stabbed his leg to force submission. With a chilling smile, he ordered Michael to make his men drop their weapons, which Michael did in agony. The defeated leader lamented losing to 2 brats, but warned Karen that they would be too much, even for a Liston. Karen correctly guessed he meant the black mages, mocking his reliance on them. He noted the magic circle had vanished, explaining that they naturally had a guardian. A massive explosion then echoed in the distance. Karen remarked that their delay with the leader cost them the chance to capture the black mage alive. Sabina appeared, holding the black mage's severed head. Leo was repulsed, while Sabina declared the mission a failure for letting the key clue a living mage escape. Karen cheekily asked his aunt if she was impressed by his tactics. Sabina beat the defeated leader unconscious, then scolded Karen for his reckless charge into enemy territory, comparing him to her brother. She grudgingly awarded him points for Liston family audacity but docked points for taking a hostage. When asked why, Karen explained he exploited their expectations, as no one would anticipate a noble taking a hostage. Sabina laughed, calling him a mad boy unlike any she'd met. The captured leader thought to himself, "What a bunch of lunatics." Sabina announced they'd returned to Baron Balas's castle, as many questions awaited. As they departed the battlefield, the imprisoned villagers were freed from their cages, and heartfelt family reunions commenced. Following the conflict, as loved ones reconnected with those liberated, Karen spotted the bandit Orha standing apart, visibly weighed by guilt. Karen, with a mocking tone, asked if he was feeling a pang of remorse. She told Orha it was premature for such feelings, noting that he might still face confinement in the Baron's dungeon alongside his fellow bandits. She then informed him that he would accompany his captain to Blue Sea Castle, rather than being locked away in the Baron. Leo questioned the wisdom of leaving Orha unbound. Karen clarified that they needed his assistance to transport their injured captain but cautioned Leo to remain vigilant. At that moment, a freed villager approached, speaking in Orha's defense and questioning whether he too would face punishment. The villager revealed that Orha had genuinely cared for the captives, discreetly providing medicine to the ill and sharing his own rations with the hungry, and urged them to show him mercy. Sabina turned to Karen for his thoughts. Karen, observing Orha's stunned expression, decided they might consider leniency, citing Orha's role in guiding them to the bandit hideout. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Orha vowed unwavering loyalty to Karen until his last breath. Leo interrupted, urging Karen to come see something significant. He led him to a barrel containing a massive, radiant magic stone. As the villagers rejoiced and hurled insults at the captured bandits, Leo was confident the young master would host a grand feast upon their return. Karen, lost in thought, finally understood the true motive behind the large bandit presence in this impoverished, remote region, a magic stone mine unknown, even to the Baron's family. Leo noticed the cunning glint in his cousin's eyes, and asked what scheme he was devising now. Baron Rohan and his father arrived to commend the rescuers. Rohan ordered the prisoners to be cast into the dungeon and asked Sabina to surrender the bandit leader. Sabina, identifying herself as merely a guardian, directed him to her students, Karen and Leo. Rohan extended an invitation to a humble banquet, but Karen declined, stating they needed to depart for Blue Sea Castle immediately. Rohan then raised the issue of the mission fee, admitting his barony lacked the funds to pay it in full and requesting a payment deferral. Karen's demeanor shifted to a sly expression as he began to subtly provoke Rohan, describing the barony as an isolated backwater among remote regions. Karen then revealed that the bandits were pursuing something entirely different. He unveiled the magic stone to the astonished Rohan, who confessed he was unaware of any mine on his lands. Holding all the leverage, Karen declared he had a proposition. He proposed that Blue Sea Castle collaborate with the barony of Balos to develop the magic stone mine, with the castle providing initial funding and security forces. Rohan, inwardly shocked, wondered if this young boy grasped the enormity of his words. Yet, he quickly recognized that partnering with the influential Liston family would be a significant advantage for his struggling barony. Rohan marveled at the boldness of a child conducting such high-stakes negotiations. Karen added that this arrangement could facilitate the establishment of a Liston Knights garrison in the barony, addressing its defense issues while fostering economic growth. When Rohan inquired about the proposed share percentage, Karen deftly sidestepped, stating it was inappropriate for a child like him to delve into such details and that Rohan should discuss it with his father. Rohan agreed to consult his father and reach out soon. Later, Karen asked Lady Sabina why she anticipated complications at the bandit hideout. Sabina explained that the issue stemmed from the black mage she confronted, revealing he was no ordinary sorcerer but Tad Diahata, a second-degree wanted criminal in the Empire and a Sixth Circle mage. She reprimanded the boys for focusing on the minor bandits and overlooking the more critical target. Sabina elaborated that true strength develops only by facing formidable foes, and had they defeated the black mage themselves, they wouldn't have wasted time on insignificant rabble. Thus, she deemed the mission a failure, a verdict Karen accepted with respect. Turning to Leo, who felt overlooked, she unexpectedly praised him, noting his performance exceeded her expectations, especially for his first encounter with the undead. She encouraged him to trust in his abilities. At Blue Sea Castle, Yahello returned from the capital. His entourage greeted him, informing him of the group's return from the west, and that Karen, Leo, and Sabina were en route from their mission. Suddenly, a messenger arrived with an urgent dispatch from the Imperial Palace. Yahello opened the letter and was stunned by its contents. The Emperor, who had made no prior mention of this before Yahello left the capital, had personally invited his grandson Karen to the capital. On the train back, Orha carried his captive captain Michael. Michael attempted to convince Orha to flee with him, exploiting what he saw as a lapse in security, but Orha, enraged, struck him and refused, reminding Michael that he had deemed him worthless and expendable. Upon arriving at Blue Sea Castle, they were welcomed by family members. Bali remarked with sarcasm that Karen's surroundings remained as tumultuous as ever, prompting a sharp retort from Karen, who issued a veiled threat. Bali warmly embraced his son while Sabina conversed with him, suggesting that her brother Yahello had likely summoned him due to the trouble Karen stirred in the barony of Balos. Meanwhile, Bali congratulated his nephew Leo on his remarkable achievement, noting that word of it had already spread. Leo beamed, believing his father and grandfather would be proud. Karen, announcing he was exhausted, said he would retire to rest. The discussion grew serious, as Sabina asked Bali if he knew about the unusual political climate in the empire. Bali explained that the other major powers, aside from their family, were swiftly aligning around the Saman Duchy and the Diaz Marquisate. Sabina noted that their father, Yahello, had intended to meet with several families in the capital to gauge the situation but cancelled after unsatisfactory talks with the emperor. Bali clarified that these two families had orchestrated the overthrow of the previous emperor and the rise of the current one, now dominating the system. Sabina lamented that her brother Yahello had stepped back from central power for the empire's future, only to face this treatment. They concluded that the era of peace was waning and their family needed to act. Sabina saw a silver lining, pointing out that Karen's actions provided a legitimate reason to expand their influence by deploying troops to other families' territories. She described Karen as a fascinating boy for inadvertently benefiting the family at a critical moment. Bali teased his aunt for praising him excessively, to which she replied she wasn't truly praising him. Later, Sir Xerus greeted them, commending their success in apprehending the fugitive bandits. He declared he would begin interrogating the bandit leader, whom Orha was carrying, vowing to extract every detail. When he inquired about Orha's identity, Karen explained that, for now, he was considered a bandit, but had served as an informant, so he should be treated leniently and released. Karen announced his intention to make Orha his personal servant, to which Xerus agreed. As the boys attempted to rest, Xerus halted them, emphasizing that their task was far from finished. Karen inquired when Xerus had arrived, to which he responded that he had only recently shown up, and that they needed to draft a report. When Karen asked whether they had to compose individual reports, Xerus permitted them to collaborate on a single one. Karen quickly tried to shift the responsibility to Leo, claiming he had handled the toughest parts. He then used flattery, noting that their uncle Tiles would review the report and that this was Leo's opportunity to highlight his accomplishments and gain favor. This argument persuaded Leo. Upon their return, Xerus commanded that the captives be secured. Meanwhile, Sabina tossed him the head of the wanted outlaw, stating that the boy's report would suffice. As Karen wished Leo luck with the report, Leo declared he was heading to the mana training room to practice the fourth form he had recently mastered, leaving Xerus amazed by his relentless dedication. Elsewhere, Yahello convened an urgent family council meeting. He explained that the meeting was prompted by intelligence gathered during the recent suppression of demons near the castle. He requested Hinrich to call for the Knight Commander. Xarus was summoned and presented with a fragment of demon skin. Yahello revealed that this sample was retrieved from the western celestial dome region. Ho observed that the dark mana embedded in the skin was extraordinary and, with a jolt, recognized it as belonging to the fallen emperor. Yahello suggested two possibilities. Either the emperor's will persisted in the world, or he was still alive. He concluded that this issue was tied to the ongoing developments in the empire. Then, he shared another update. News of the events in the barony of Balos had reached the emperor, who had personally invited Karen to the capital. Yahello announced his intention to send Leo and the Sea Wolf Knights to escort Karen, but emphasized that he would consult Karen first and not compel him, given his young age. Above all, Ho wanted to understand Karen's reasoning behind his deal with Baron Bellows. Thus, he instructed Xerus to fetch him. Xerus found Karen meditating in the training room. Karen asked when Xerus had arrived, and he replied that he had come not long ago. Karen noted that, aside from immediate family, Sir Xerus was the only one permitted to enter the training room, but he couldn't recall Xerus ever doing so before, suggesting the matter was urgent. Xerus informed him of his summons to the family council to discuss a forthcoming trip to the capital. He clarified that the head of the family had called for Lord Karen, and he would learn the details directly upon arriving at the council. At the council, Ho informed Karen that he had just heard about the successful completion of his first mission, which Karen confirmed. Yahello immediately questioned why Karen had acted independently and overstepped his authority by negotiating with the House of Balos, asking if he had considered that his bold actions might offend them. Karen realized this was an interrogation rather than praise but defended himself, explaining that he had merely made a single offer to the young Baron Balos, who had accepted it willingly. In the council hall, Karen justified his actions before his grandfather, stating that he believed something outweighed noble etiquette. When Ho asked what could be more significant than courtesy, Karen replied that it was the family's honor. This answer profoundly impressed Yahello, who reflected that Karen could have bragged about the deal's benefits and taken personal credit but instead prioritized the family's interests, deeming it admirable conduct. Based on this, Yahello made his decision. He acknowledged that Karen's deal would greatly benefit the family and assigned his son Bali to handle the formal negotiations. Bali agreed to depart for the barony of Balos at dawn the next day, to which Ho remarked that a father gaining glory through his son's achievements was not undesirable. Yahello then addressed the emperor's letter, formally notifying Karen that His Majesty had summoned him, as news of his actions had reached the capital. Karen deduced, based on Xerxes' information, that the emperor's letter had arrived before Yahello's return to Blue Sea Castle. He wondered if the emperor's intelligence network was truly so capable. Karen concluded that the influential nobles controlling the puppet emperor were likely behind this prompt invitation, not the emperor himself. Yahello gave Karen the choice to decline the trip. He believed Karen had already grasped the implications of traveling to the capital at this time. Yahello began considering the strategic consequences of accepting or refusing. Bali thought Yahello should not have left the decision to Karen, but Karen interjected, declaring that since the emperor had summoned him, it was his duty to go, adding that it would be a chance to reunite with his maternal grandfather. When Karen asked if he would travel alone, Yahello confirmed that Leo would join him, along with Hans's squad as escorts. Karen questioned the need for additional guards with his grandfather present, prompting Yahello to jokingly shout that the guards were not for his protection but to manage any trouble he might stir up. Yahello announced that their departure would be in 3 days. In a later scene, Bali finalized his negotiations with Baron Rohan. They agreed to split the mine shares, with 80% for the Liston family and 20% for the Balos family. However, Bali was perplexed by an additional condition he found difficult to comprehend, allocating 5% of Balos' share, a quarter of their portion, directly to Karen and Leo. Deeming this excessive for a mere commission, Bali asked Rohan, a distinguished Imperial Academy graduate, why he made this decision. Rohan candidly explained that it was an investment to gain favor with the 2 young wolves, destined to lead Blue Sea Castle. Bali found Rohan's assumption about the boy's potential arrogant and highly disrespectful. Bali and Rohan exchanged sharp words, with Bali commending his boldness. The boys were then summoned, gratefully accepted the offer, and Rohan expressed his family's honor in the partnership. As they left, Leo had a question for Karen. After securing the deal with the barony of Balos, Leo asked how they would split their 5% share. Karen calmly replied that he would naturally take 9/10, leaving Leo with 1/10. Shocked by this suggestion, Leo protested, but Karen issued a threat, causing the frightened Leo to agree immediately. Bali and his aide observed the scene, with the aide noting that the 2 boys, who used to bicker fiercely as children, had now become inseparable. Upon reaching the capital, Leo was both thrilled and nervous, admitting he had only heard rumors about the place and was unsure how to behave. Karen reassured him, but Leo insisted that meeting the emperor justified his excitement. He then fantasized about attending social gatherings to meet the capital's beauties. Sabina, overhearing their conversation, joined them and remarked that Dus was a fascinating place filled with skilled fighters, making it a valuable experience for them. She then requested wine glasses to toast their first mission's success. With sarcasm, Karen pointed out the absence of wine glasses in a 13-year-old boy's room, so Sabina poured wine into water cups. She asked Leo if he had ever tried wine, and he admitted that Karen had shared some with him before. Sabina extended a glass to Leo, who took it gratefully. She lifted her own, toasting their impressive progress, and Karen expressed gratitude for her guidance. She then declared that the 3 years she'd vowed to shield them had ended, lamenting that she wouldn't witness the chaos they'd unleash in the capital. Leo's face fell at the news of her imminent return to the North Sea, and he asked if they'd ever see her again. Sabina chuckled at his sentimentality, then cautioned him against attending parties with Karen, noting that Karen's charm, skill, and silver tongue would steal the spotlight. Leo, flustered, pleaded with Karen not to ruin his marriage prospects, prompting Karen to call him a fool. Karen told Leo to hush and keep drinking. Later, at Blue Sea Castle, Bali reported to Ho that negotiations with Balos had concluded successfully. Ho was astonished that they'd agreed to cede part of their stake to Karen and Leo. Bali explained that the young baron's perspective, framing it as a future investment, had swayed them. Ho commended the young baron's cleverness, noting they'd secured a trustworthy ally. He delegated all Balos-related matters to Bali. However, Bali sensed another motive behind his summons, as his father rarely offered praise. His instincts were correct. Ho revealed that the Emperor's summons for Karen was unprecedented, as no family member besides Ho had ever been summoned. Ho then shared a troubling observation. During his private audience with the Emperor, he detected fear in His Majesty's eyes. Continuing, Ho told Bali he suspected an external force was behind Karen's invitation. Bali agreed it seemed politically driven, and questioned why Ho hadn't declined the Emperor's request, given the delicate situation. Ho admitted he was intrigued by Karen's potential, noting that Karen had been chosen by the ancestral sword guillotine, marking him as central to the family's future and destined to face numerous trials. Ho viewed the summons as a test of Karen's ability to bear the family's legacy. He asked Bali if he was concerned. Bali, though deeply touched, steadied himself and confidently affirmed his faith in his son. Ho, surprised, smiled, and called it a splendid response. The following day, Sabina prepared to depart for the North Sea. Xeris asked if she'd bid farewell to the boys, but she dismissed the need, saying she'd enjoyed their company over stolen wine the previous night, and preferred a quiet exit since they were busy preparing for their trip. They exchanged goodbyes, with Xeris promising more wine for her next visit. Before leaving, Sabina shared a silent look with Karen, who watched from his window. She left, wishing him well until they met again. Karen mused that the North Sea felt like home. Hungry, he thought of finding food and wine while waiting. He hadn't expected Sabina to leave so abruptly. As she departed, Karen sensed his uncles would soon make their moves. As if on cue, his Uncle Tiles appeared behind him, startling him. At the train station, servants handled the young men's luggage. Leo questioned the commotion, and Henrik explained it was expected since they were meeting the Emperor as family representatives. Karen grumbled about Hans's squad accompanying them, and Xeris clarified their role was protection, but Hans curtly retorted it was to prevent trouble. Before departing, Tiles visited Karen in his room. After exchanging greetings, Tiles confirmed he knew of Karen's capital trip and made one request, that Karen not behave there as he did at Blue Sea Castle. Karen agreed, but privately noted Tiles had been monitoring him. Tiles warned that the capital was teeming with enemies eager to topple their family, and if Karen gave them an excuse, Tiles would personally discipline him harshly. Once Tiles left, Karen's demeanor shifted. He sneered at his uncle's threat, recognizing Tiles was leveraging his status as firstborn, and vowed to outmaneuver him. At the station, departure preparations were finalized. Karen bickered with Hans when Orha, a former bandit, approached, thanking Karen for a second chance. Karen responded coolly, and Orha jokingly warned he'd only take him to the capital to toss him into its harsh prison, urging him not to slack. Orha pleaded not to be abandoned, and Karen said it depended on his behavior. Xeris offered final advice, urging them to avoid trouble and return safely. As the train prepared to leave, Bali rushed to the platform to see his son off, explaining he wanted one last moment with him, and mentioning that Karen's maternal grandfather awaited his arrival. Bali embraced him, asking him to stay safe and keep mischief to a minimum, making Karen laugh. After the train departed, Tiles, in his office, learned that his second son Raphael's wife was scheming in the capital, but chose to hold off on action. On the train, Karen asked Hans about the journey's length, and Hans replied it would take roughly 6 hours through Taba's autonomous territory. They discussed Taba, a unique city where commoners elect their mayor, and commerce thrives over agriculture, with wealth determining status. Hans noted Taba's influence stemmed from its vast wealth, though other lords closely watched it. Karen mentioned that some provincial citizens flee corrupt lords for autonomous regions. Hans added that Taba was friendly with Blue Sea Castle, often entrusting knights with significant tasks. As the boys planned a covert visit to the city, Karen's sword suddenly reacted to an unknown presence, signaling danger. Initially suspecting his uncle's Tiles or Raphael had planted an attacker among the escorts, Karen dismissed the idea, knowing they weren't that reckless. Leo, noticing Karen's odd behavior, called his name. Concluding the threat was external, Karen urgently ordered Hans to contact Taba's authorities. When Hans questioned the sudden command, Karen shouted there was no time to explain and instructed him to warn the other cars of an imminent attack. Hans, stunned, complied, relaying the alert to the escorts, who prepared accordingly. Meanwhile, Karen pondered the nature of the external threat, wondering how anyone could attack a moving train. Nearby, a group of masked assailants readied their plan. Their leader declared the moment had arrived, and his men sprang into action, placing explosive barrels with a lit fuse on the tracks. As the train neared, the leader signaled to brace for the blast. The train struck the barrels, triggering a massive explosion that derailed and wrecked it. In Taba's autonomous territory, the mayor presided over a chaotic meeting. Attendees hurled accusations, some alleging money laundering and claiming the National Tax Service was investigating, while others countered with similar charges. The dispute intensified, with one demanding the mayor punish his rivals, branding them criminals. The mayor regretted attending the meeting, silently wishing he'd stepped down after his tenure as finance minister, lamenting how the city had descended into a chaotic battleground with endless conflicts between the noble and commoner guilds. An aide disrupted the proceedings with an urgent message for the mayor, who permitted him to approach after dispersing the quarreling attendees. One lingering attendee inquired if the message concerned the tax inquiry, but the mayor, lighting a cigarette, coolly responded that such a trivial investigation was now irrelevant. When asked if it had been cancelled, he snapped, "No," adding that the investigation could go to the devil. Then he disclosed the shocking news. 5 minutes prior, the train traveling from the Liston family's territory to the capital had exploded, with the Grand Duke's 2 grandsons aboard. The attendee was stunned, and the mayor grimly explained that this event spelled doom for them all. At the wreckage site, Karen emerged from the debris. Hans anxiously asked if he was hurt, to which Karen replied he had only minor scrapes. Hans quickly requested a status update, and the report indicated that of the 11 people, one, named Dell, was seriously injured, with 2 others sustaining minor wounds. Another report arrived from Orha's squad, confirming 2 fatalities among their group. Karen remarked that the situation must be grave if a low-ranking member like Orha was delivering the report. He asked Hans their location, and Hans informed him they were roughly 10 kilometers from Taba's autonomous territory. Hans added that the territory had been contacted before the 2 young men regained consciousness, and aid was en route. He urged Karen and Leo to escape as far as possible, assuring them his squad would hold off the enemy. But Karen's sword, guillotine, stirred again, signaling they weren't alone. An ambush loomed. Karen dismissed Hans's plea to flee, apologizing and explaining it wasn't feasible. When Hans pressed for a reason, Karen pointed out that the attackers had destroyed the Emperor's vital railway, an act tantamount to treason. He questioned how far they could flee from such bold enemies. Turning to Leo, Karen asked if he was still fit to fight, and Leo eagerly confirmed he was. Karen declared they had only one choice left. As a masked attacker reeled from an unexpected strike, Karen appeared behind him with a confident grin, proclaiming that all the enemies must be eliminated. He launched his attack. The attacker's leader noted that the defenders outnumbered his expectations. Hans ordered the second squad to dismount from the vehicles and form a defensive perimeter to shield the young masters. He warned Karen that every enemy was at least a 3-star fighter. Karen observed that their leader, standing at the forefront, radiated the presence of a 6-star warrior. The leader addressed Karen by name, Karen Listine, demanding he drop his weapon and surrender. Karen noted the leader's voice was magically distorted. The leader then offered to spare the knights and servants if Karen complied quietly. From this, Karen inferred, and told Hans, that the attackers aimed to capture him alive. He asked if Hans understood the implication. Hans grasped Karen's meaning and pleaded with him not to act recklessly. But Karen shouted, questioning why Hans was holding him back, and declared that since they couldn't kill him, he was the one who could kill them. Leo sighed at his cousin's impulsiveness, while Hans ordered all squads to engage to protect the young masters. A fierce battle erupted, with the Liston Knights forming a protective ring around the two young men, clashing ferociously with the attackers. The conflict between the knights and masked assailants intensified. Karen wove through the enemies, striking them down one by one, taunting their reluctance to approach and offering to come to them himself. The leader ordered his men to retreat, declaring he would deal with Karen personally. Karen remarked that the boss had finally stepped up, but Hans intervened, urging Karen to stand down, warning that this opponent was too perilous. The leader mocked Hans, calling him a foolish knight rushing to his demise. Hans defiantly retorted that they'd see who would fall